Welcome back to This American Ride podcast, where we talk about issues that affect you, the average American. What's up, and welcome back to the podcast. I'm George. I'm here with Burt. And in the true fashion of sticking with everything American, especially for most of the country, nothing is more American than football. And today we are here and we are talking about college football. But listen, before we get going, I just want to let you know, give us a follow on whatever podcast platform you listen to us on. And if you're watching us on the YouTube, hit that subscribe button for us, leave us a comment, and let us know how you feel about what we're about to talk about.
Yeah. What's more American than football and making money? And that's kind of what we wanted to talk about today, right?
That is where we're at, man. We're talking about college football, NCAA, and the letters NIL.
Yeah.
Yep.
NIL, which stands for
name, images, and likeness. So I think probably a lot of people don't understand what that stands for, and have even less of appreciation for how it's about to shape one of the oldest collegiate sports that we watch.
Yes. Well, it's not just going to affect football.
No.
But I think people that aren't into sports in general, or especially college sports, don't probably have any idea how controversial this whole topic is. And like you said, the way it's going to change things moving forward. And it's really, I mean, we've been talking about it, and we've been kind of doing some research, and it's a confusing topic. So if you're not someone who's kind of, paid attention to it and knows what's going on, it could be really, really confusing. It's kind of confusing to me, the whole concept.
So I think there are topics that we talk about on a podcast, most definitely. And I feel like there are topics that we can come about and, that we're generally knowledgeable about or passionate enough about, or have, a lot of times you're talking from experience. And I felt like this is something that we thought we could just get on here and talk about, and then quickly realized we couldn't until we did a little bit of research.
Yeah, it's tough to talk about something when you don't really get the ins and outs of it,
Well, I think it's tough to talk about something that the people involved in it, and by the people involved in it, I mean some of the top coaches in the NCAA and NCAA football and basketball, and people don't fully understand it yet.
They're struggling with it. They really are.
Yeah. So, a lot of people have a lot of different views on, paying what I consider and what most people consider amateur athletes, because theoretically you were considered an
NCAA
amateur.
sports are amateur athletes.
Correct.
They have been since the beginning of the creation of the NCAA and college sports.
Correct. I view this as a lot like when we grew up, and again, if you're listening to this and you weren't watching the Olympics in the early 80s, the Olympics were all amateur from the U.S., but we very often competed against professionals from other countries, such as the USSR, and we were dominated in areas like that. That is one thing that made one of, the U.S. hockey team one of the greatest moments in U.S. sports history of beating Russia, because it was a bunch of amateur nobody hockey players. And now the Olympics are not that. They're not that. They're allowed to have brand deals. You, as an Olympic athlete, you couldn't have brand deals until you were retired from the Olympics.
Right. But if other countries were, so this is kind of off topic what we're going to talk about, but other countries were using professional athletes, then there must not have been rules against it.
It was just a U.S. thing. I feel like
it was a U.S. thing. It's very different from the NCAA and the history of it. And what we've, really been fighting hard to keep out of the sport, was what we were talking about before, the booster slipping the fat envelope to the kid
at the party with the
at
suit
the party
on,
with the jacket on and all that. And that's been something, if you watch any 80s college sports movies, like you've seen that, like that's been something they've been trying to keep out of the game forever. And more recently, and what was it, the late 2000s, is that what was
Reggie Bush?
Well, no, with the litigation that's kind of stirred this all up.
Something we didn't realize necessarily about the NCAA, and they have been the subject, and I didn't necessarily realize this, of a lot of litigation. And going back to how litigation has changed the NCAA before this, and I didn't know this till recently, was that when player used to transfer, they used to either had to sit out a year,
Yep.
or
they lost a year eligibility,
or they had to get a waiver. And if they didn't get that waiver, essentially what happened is they just filed suit against the NCAA until the NCAA was finally like,
yeah, here's kind of throwing the towel.
Here's your waiver. Like, you know,
they would just give the waiver until it came to the point most recently now that we have this transfer portal, and they just anybody can do it.
Anybody,
because they got tired of being sued, basically.
And keep that transfer thing in mind, because that's going to come, I think, back later in this topic a little bit. But the NCAA was part of a class action lawsuit in the early 2000s for, students who wanted to make money for their name, image, and likeness, and the fact that their schools made money, against their, name, image, and likeness, their NIL. So they essentially sued the NCAA because the NCAA, again, they were trying to keep, I feel like they were trying to keep the sport pure. And maybe that was naive of them. Maybe it's a naive of me for wanting it to be that way.
It might be naive, but I mean, I feel the same way. And I think a lot of people feel the same way. Like, it changed, we have professional sports.
Yeah.
Right. And things change a lot when you throw in all this money, and it sways the balance of, what's fair, when you have this much money being thrown at kids. And now it's not just giving them money for, what they've been able to do or bring to the school. Now it can be influenced in who they get to the school, and now you're swaying kids from going from one school to the other based on where they're going to get the most money given to them.
Correct.
And I think that has a huge impact on just the balance of the sport itself.
I think the impact that has is much, the can of worms that is there right before us right now is I think much bigger than most people, I think, see it as it is. Because
you can kind of compare it to sports like baseball that don't have a salary cap, right?
Yep, there is no salary cap.
And what teams in baseball, typically you keep seeing the same teams are the top tier team, the Yankees, right? They have the most money to offer, right? So now you're going to have the same exact thing happen at the college level. What schools end up with the biggest, what they're calling collectives, which is groups of boosters donating a pool of money to give to these kids.
Right.
So yeah, it's going to be, which schools have the biggest collective and have the most money to offer.
Which isn't it? Which becomes very interesting, because when we thought of NIL and NIL came about, the first thing I thought about NIL is like, hey, that quarterback is going to get paid for being on the cover of NCAA football, or, somebody's going to get paid for that sneaker deal, and it's going to, open up, something else. We talked about like car dealerships. There were local car dealerships and stuff that were getting involved in NIL. And then when you start to peel back the layers of it and you start to listen to guys like Coach K or Nick Saban and some of these guys talk about the subject who, are obviously, it's part of their world. That's not the biggest source of NIL money. NIL money is basically boosters, who, can pay these students who are not associated with the college. And a lot of these alumni funds, which, as Burt said, are collectives, which I've never even heard the word collective referred to before.
Nope.
We started researching this. These collectives of people who can put millions of dollars together to put money for, these athletes. And in return, these people are getting benefits. Like in the case of Texas, they're getting preferred seating. They're getting probably preferred access to these players, I would assume, and they're getting other perks that people who are not donating to these collectives are not even available for.
Yeah. And this is a side effect that they didn't want, for sure. What they wanted was what you spoke of before, the local car dealership or the local businesses, paying these kids to come out and, rep their brand or whatever. And that's kind of what the thought process was, that that's how they can, make a little money off of, the platform and whatnot. But it's so far past that now.
It's interesting, people, we were watching an interview with Coach K, and he said, the NCAA is, getting ready for the tsunami of, opportunity, and people who make a lot of money and by people who make a lot of money, I mean, this is not average individual money. This is people who have millions of dollars to donate for their love of, their school or their love of whatever, and they have millions of dollars to donate to that cause. So that's money I can't wrap my head around. I can't wrap my head around, at this point in my life, giving millions away,
Yeah. Well,
So,
I mean, if you think about these bigger schools, these bigger, what we know as the powerhouse schools in football, right? The Michigans, the Alabamas, the Clemsons, the Penn States, the Ohio States. Think about the number of students they have per year, how long they've been around, how many people come out of there and are extremely successful.
Yes.
End up extremely wealthy.
Very successful.
Right. And they love their school and they're supporting their school. And plus the clout that it gets them, right? For how much they donate, like you said, the access it gains them because they donated more than anybody else. And you have such a large pool of people with money willing to donate because they want their school's team to be, the best and have the best players. So much money. That's such a huge, huge opportunity for a mess.
And with athletes and with money comes what? Agents.
Oh, well, that's involved, right?
Right. So now we're adding another layer,
because these kids can't go out and get these because they're supposed to be going out and finding these opportunities, right? It's not supposed to be the coach and the athletic director bringing these opportunities to them. They're supposed to. They've been given the authorization to go ahead and find these opportunities for themselves, but they can't do that themselves. So obviously they need agents. So now we have college players with agents, which was completely against the rules and frowned upon just a few years ago.
Yeah.
You weren't allowed to have an agent until you were done and declared for the draft or you were finished playing whatever that sport was.
Yeah.
And we're going to the next level. But now you have the number one, quarterback in the nation coming in out of high school. He's already going to have an agent. He's going to come into it with a nation because these kids are allowed legally to start doing this in high school.
Oh, yeah.
There's high school kids now making money. It's all based on state law, but.
So, which is another level. There's levels of laws that are involved in this.
Yep.
And now we've got the NCAA that now has this NIL, right? Money. And now that there's money involved, now we have agents involved. Now, what else do we have involved? We've got the government involved.
Of course.
We've got the state government involved, and we've got the federal government involved. And there are committees on NIL already. There are layers of government now that are involved in the regulation of this, of this NIL, because one thing that's still not allowed to happen in NIL and not allowed to happen yet, and I kind of feel like it's just eventually going to go that way, is that college is not allowed to pay the athlete. And by pay the athlete, I mean the college itself is not allowed to write a check to the athlete as a salary.
Right.
So
they're not controlling the funds.
Correct.
And picking and choosing where it goes. But
however, Alabama's
that's on the books.
That's on the books. But Nick Saban at Alabama said, he said, we're dividing our NIL money up evenly. Everybody gets what they get from their collective fund, which again, he followed that up with, I don't know how sustainable a model like that is.
Yeah.
So while the thought is good, the sustainability of it is, probably not awesome.
For me, on my personal level, it kind of ruins college football for me. It's college football, one of the joys of watching college football and the fanfare and the hoopla and the college atmosphere and the players playing not for money. They're
love of the game.
I'm not going to be so naive to say like these kids don't, like a lot of these kids at the big level, they know they're going to the next level. Obviously, if they stay healthy, blah, blah, blah.
A lot of them are.
But just while they're there, they're playing for their school and they're playing for national championships. And there was always a little something extra in that they were playing for more than money. Yeah. And you didn't have those issues that you see in the pros where, a guy's not going to play hurt because, he risks next year and he risks his money and his future, right? College, man, these kids were laying it all on the line because they cared about their teammates. They cared about the school. They cared about winning a national championship, which is such a huge, big deal. And now that's going to be, I feel like that's going to kind of start to fade. I think these kids are now playing for money. They're thinking about this money. They're thinking about next level money. You're already seeing it, and which stinks, but it was already kind of happening before that NIL with kids who knew they were going to go in the pros, just flat out sitting out of a national championship game.
Oh, yeah.
Because they didn't want to risk getting hurt.
Willis McGahee.
Well, McGahee had an amazing career.
But he also had a terrible injury in a national championship game.
And still went on to have a great NFL career. So, because he played, but you've already started seeing this, which is already kind of diminishing it. But now you're throwing in all this extra money and more kids getting this money. And now it's business, right? And so guys are making business decisions. And it's just, I feel like it's a second professional league. You have the NFL and you have the NCAA, and they're both pro leagues, basically.
Basically, that's the way it's going to be. And I pulled up some numbers because people, like, oh, what was the college athlete that doesn't get paid for all the money that they bring into the school? Well, the college athlete, the full ride, the full scholarship guys, these guys that are playing at these big name schools, and ironically, the same guys who are going to be getting the bulk of this NIL money are going there in a full ride.
Right.
And I think that, people, I pulled a couple of conferences. I pulled the ACC, the SEC, the Big 10, the Big 12, and the Pac-12. The average out-of-state tuition, because obviously most of these guys are, not all, but a lot are going to school, out of state to go to these schools, right? The average out-of-state tuition is $47K a year to attend these schools. Board probably between $12,000 and $15,000 a year. Books probably another $2K a year, right? They're not paying for any of that.
It's $200,000 if they're there for 4 years. If
they're there for 5 years, it's over $250,000. All right, that they are getting that education that somebody else would have to pay. The average person would have to pay.
That's always bothered me from the days when I was of that age playing. That people poo-poo that like they're being abused, like they're being oppressed. Are you kidding me? You're getting an opportunity that so many other kids either don't get or have to go deep into debt to do. Right. And you're getting it handed to you on a silver platter just for your athletic ability. And then so many other people go, oh, they're not allowed to work, or they're not allowed to do this. What do you need?
Right.
Everything that you could possibly need as a Division I Alabama football player on scholarship is provided to you. Everything.
And the average school salary coming out of a 4-year school is $59,600 after a 4-year degree. Roughly that same period. So it's going to take that student 4 or 5 years to make that money that student athlete. And again, I'm not poo-pooing student athletes. I'm just trying to paint a picture of, what is actually happening. It's going to take that working student then, 4 or 5 years to make that same amount of money, plus whatever debt they might have from their education. And they may or may not have, depending on their situation. But, it's, I would bet that half of NCAA athletes probably would not have the means to pay $250,000 for an education. I would bet it's probably more than that.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's staggering what an education costs, So I think it's so you went through, and this is the other thing, you looked at programs, when you looked at a couple of schools when you were playing, what, before NIL, like what things would factor into, probably think of a good like three to five things would factor a student athlete going to a college.
Well, traditionally you go to the campus and, you have to like the campus. You have to you got to be able to see yourself there. I mean, like I did, visits and, I went to, like New Haven. Right. And I instantly knew I didn't want to be in New Haven just who I am, right? It's more of, now it's small, but it's like city, right? I didn't want to be in that type of atmosphere. That's just not me. So I think you look at, the campus itself, and how you see yourself fitting into that and enjoying, because you're moving there, you're living there, right? And for some people, they don't want to go someplace that's way different than where they're from, right? Some people from, the sticks, or whatever, like, it'd be crazy culture shock for someone who lives in the back, hills of Virginia to go to Rutgers and think about that campus, right?
It would be.
You know what I mean? That's high speed city. And then for some kids, that's what they dream of. Like, they want to get out of the sticks, right, and go to the city. So those are things you consider. Obviously, the schools, the ones that do that, the athletes that do care about, the education, are looking at the programs and what it is they want to do, right? So I didn't have a lot of guidance when I was coming out and looking to go somewhere. I didn't have a lot of help from my coach, any guidance counselor. I was kind of winging it. So I just kind of was looking at what I thought I would enjoy and where I would like being.
Right.
But I mean, I'm sure there's some other factors. I mean, obviously, the average student, not thinking of a student athlete, but the average student's looking at cost, right?
Yep.
The average student's looking at, in-state tuition versus out-of-state tuition, and that kind of community. A lot of kids are looking, even athletes probably, I'm sure there's plenty of athletes or just regular students that maybe don't want to be as far from home, worried about being homesick, or just don't want to be that far, more than a couple hours from their family. So that's a big factor. Some kids want to get the heck away and go from, the East Coast to the West Coast.
Yep.
Some kids, I know a lot of kids nowadays, which I didn't really factor it in, although based on a campus, it was a little factor, but going to like nice weather. Yeah. Right. I mean, guys nowadays, they want to go down south, where, 350 days a year, the girls are dressed a little skimpier and looking a little better and not be bundled up in, I don't know, the Northeast in November, December, January.
And why wouldn't I want to play football in Alabama versus the University of South Dakota, or the University of Minnesota,
There's a lot of factors. There's a lot of factors that go in, but now
I feel
what's going to happen? The overriding factor is going to be who's giving me the most money.
That's going to be it. I mean, facilities used to play a piece of it. Coaching used to play a piece of it. I'm sure, in some cases, family lineage and heritage probably played a piece of it. I want to go play ball here because like my father played ball here, or what have you. And we just saw, a number of years ago, we had a guy who went to our high school, Irv Smith. He went to Notre Dame. You can be damn well sure his kid did not go to Notre Dame. His kid went to Alabama.
Oh yeah.
And then his kid went to the NFL.
Yeah.
Do you think he would have gone to the NFL had he gone to Notre Dame?
Maybe. Why would you say that? There's a lot of good people coming out of Notre Dame.
But what's the percentage? I don't know. What's the percentage of people going to the NFL from Alabama? I feel like is like.
I don't know, but if you lined up
Notre Dame versus Alabama,
if you lined up the top 20 schools getting guys into the league, I mean,
it's up there.
Notre Dame, yeah.
I don't know. I'm
a Notre Dame fan, so.
Oh, there you go. But I feel like
you got a guy on your team from Notre Dame.
If
your third string quarterback or fourth string quarterback,
my fourth string quarterback.
Just saying. I mean, they put out. I mean, one of the top tight ends came out last year was from Notre Dame.
We drafted 2 people in the first round from Alabama this year.
I mean, yes, Alabama,
it's
Clemson, the SEC in general.
Yes.
Right now is putting out the most, but there's Notre Dame historically puts out some players for sure.
They have. No, I would agree with that.
Every year they have.
I just feel like Alabama's been on the hot streak for like the last decade.
Well, they have. They've been rolling since they got Saban.
Yeah.
And, they've built a thing there. And, that happens when you have a, top name coach and you win a couple championships, and then that just snowballs because kids want to go there and win championships.
Yep.
Now, if Nick Saban, sticks to his guns like he's claiming,
he won't.
He won't because he won't be there because the school will have more of a say in it. They, you know what I mean? Like the athletic director is gonna have more of a say in it. You know what I mean?
I don't say like he won't like question Nick Saban's character. I mean, he's not gonna be able to.
No.
I mean, it's not. There's just
because if they stick, he wants to stick to his guns, and it starts affecting the recruiting class, and then it starts affecting their wins in national championships. Well, then the athletic director, the president, all those are going to have a say in it. And then if he can't get on board, well, they'll just move on to somebody who can, because some other teams, A&M, and who he claims bought all their number one recruiting class last year, and those schools are going to start winning because talent wins.
Yep.
And that's why Alabama wins. I mean, you can talk about Nick Saban, being a great coach,
talent,
but
depth.
He wasn't great in NFL. No. Reality is he did a great job of recruiting and getting kids there. And then it snowballed to wins and championships. And now everybody wants to go there because who doesn't want to go to a winner?
Yeah, and it's tough. I mean, we've seen lots of guys. There have been lots of coaches, I feel like, over the years who've gone from college to the NFL and just haven't done well in the NFL. I mean, there have been some guys who've gone back and forth. I mean, Pete Carroll went back and forth.
Look, there's guys that are cut out for the NFL, and there's guys that are cut out for the college, and it's not really a knock on them. It's just the way their personalities,
different talent,
different personality. You can, some guys are good at talking to the younger kids and getting through to them, and other guys understand when they have older grown men, it's another way. And some of those guys that are good at talking to young kids can never come around to how to handle adults. So it's just that's just a personality thing, I think.
It's just the thing. So and looking at layers of the onion that this may affect. All right, say you've got a collective, right? And say you've got a collective that is thick and lush and rich and paying players, and players are coming to say Alabama and Auburn, wherever, and then they start getting injuries start stacking up. Like they get 3 or 4 of these players that are hurt. At what point then is the collective looking at the university like, yo, what's going on with the training staff? Why are our players hurt and Texas A&M's players aren't hurt?
Yeah.
So now it's like, even though the collective isn't going to pay that training staff, or they're not going to pay whatever entity is doing that, they are going to have control over the money, which is going to have control over the players, which is going to then start to dictate to the college.
Yeah.
How come our facilities aren't what they should be? How come our stadium isn't, you know what I mean?
Well, shoot, you already can't compete in the big times in college football without a state-of-the-art facility. I mean, you see schools that aren't even good. Colorado to speak of, with these amazing state-of-the-art facilities, because they know they'll never compete with the big dogs if they don't have that. That's something that they could try. They used to be able to try to have and to lure kids in. Say, look what we have. You have access to all this, but
at what point now do the people with the money who control the players start to dictate where now the college is spending its money?
Right. Because now, right. So when you have this collective with this giant pool that is persuading kids to come there, now that collective, and there's going to be, no matter how many people are involved in that collective, there's going to be a hierarchy.
Oh yeah.
Right. So there's going to be the biggest of donors who are going to have the most power.
Yep.
And they're going to be the ones wanting to flex and dictate what happens. Now we've gotten you all these kids. Well, we don't have to do that if you don't start, doing what we kind of suggest for the facilities or for the, the program, right? You don't start making decisions based on what we suggest. Well, we just won't help you get those kids.
That's right.
Right. So now these outside entities have way more pull and sway and in the decision-making process than they should or ever should have.
Right.
This is the ultimate. This whole topic is the ultimate in unintended consequences.
Yeah.
There's going to be so many things come out of this that they never dreamed of. And it's going to be a nightmare. And like whoever we were watching said, like, they can't enforce their own rules.
No.
Right. They already can't. So just imagine after several years, as it starts to grow and build, the NCAA is going to not be able to control this at all. It's going to be a mess.
It's interesting. It's like, what the definition of ignorant is? The definition of ignorant is not knowing what it is that you do not know. And they do not know the consequences that NIL is going to bring to this to not just college football, all NCAA sports. Because college football, even though college football is the biggest money generator, and we even saw Saban in an interview. He said, there's lots of college sports that are going to be affected by this, and there's hundreds of student athletes like at Alabama who are there for track and tennis and golf and things that he called non-revenue generating sports.
Well, that's just the way it's fact.
Is fact,
fact.
And football generates the revenue, and football gets the national TV time. And I see these collectives having a lot of power to the fact that, hey, we've paid $8 million for your talent. How come you're not in a bowl game, Coach Saban? How come, you know what I mean? How come
it's playoffs now?
Yeah.
Bowls don't matter.
Well, bowls don't matter, but I mean, how come we haven't won a national championship with our $10 million payroll? So now at what point does a college collective not only start to maybe dictate what a stadium looks like, what, a training facility looks like, what the training staff or who the training staff are, but now do they dictate the coaching staff? Because now they've got the money again to get the players who play the game.
Boosters have already had, historically had more say in the coach than they should. Historically, just behind the scenes, the underhanded, shady dealings that go on because of the money. But now it's just going to be right up in your face.
But now it's not backdoor stuff anymore. Now it's contracts, because these players are going to have contracts, right? If you're getting NIL money from a collective, I would assume that a collective is going to have a contract with that player through an agent who is going to have a no transfer clause in there, right? There's going to be no transfer clauses in some of these things.
I see that too.
Or better yet, what do you do with a coach when you've got a player who maybe a collective is given, $1 million to, and now the coach is going to sit that guy. So now whereas there's
so much.
This stuff it's so endless. Like when you start to peel this back,
this had great intentions, but man, it's and this could have done right. This has to be regulated somehow. But how?
Are you
who's regulating it? Because
are you speaking in favor of government regulation?
No, not even government.
Who's going to regulate?
Well, the problem is the NCAA can't regulate it based on the lawsuits, the state and federal lawsuits, right? And those laws are keeping the NCAA from being able to regulate it.
Right. So who's left to regulate it? The schools ain't going to regulate it because they're chasing the money. They're chasing the national championship. They're chasing the TV airtime. They're chasing the ticket sales. They're chasing the.
So that leaves the government,
sales.
And what happens when the government's involved? It's going to be they're going to ruin the sport.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's just.
I mean, listen,
it's a second professional league.
The government,
which will then fold because it can't compete with the NFL.
But what's worse, because the government does the government regulate the NFL?
They try. There's been a lot of congressional hearings on things.
There have been with that, but I mean, as a whole, they don't regulate the finances of the NFL.
No.
What's the other?
But again, I mean, you make it a professional sport and it's business and it's a job. And then you kind of lose that whole protecting the student athlete and the amateur athlete.
Well, and again, I have mixed feelings about protecting the student athlete because, these student athletes, they want to get paid, not protected. I mean,
well, again, in the reality of it, these kids come there, they're 17, 18, and they're not, old enough to drink or, a lot of other things. So they're still children. I know we like to think of when you turn 18, you become an adult, but we all know that an 18-year-old cannot make great decisions 9 times out of 10. So they're still children. They're still children. They're still learning. The 18-year-old male's brain isn't even fully developed. Seriously, it's
fact.
You know what I mean? So I don't know. This is a tough one, man. And not to ramble on about this forever. We just thought this was a really interesting topic and very relevant if you're into, a fan of college sports. Everything's going to change and there's going to be a lot. And the thing is, there's going to be a lot of changes over the next probably 15 years because they're going they're going to go through all these different problems, and then they're going to have to find ways to fix them. And then those fixes are going to, like I said, unintended consequences. It's going to take them a while to figure this out. And people are, some people are going to benefit, some people are going to suffer from it. I mean, this could have been a great thing for those sports that aren't the revenue generators, because you could have, the baseball team, and you could have there's the World Series of NCAA World Series, College World Series.
Yep.
Like you could have there's studs over there playing in that sport, right? They could, benefit from this. But when you're talking about football, I just see it just creating more problems than they know how to solve.
It's
and we haven't even really discussed the portal, but that in and of itself, and opening that up, has created such a problem. And to me, it's created that thing where we're just giving kids an out and not teaching them, how to stick it out and how to have commitment and fight through the adversities of life. Like, here it is, I'm playing here, and this coach doesn't like me, so I'm not seeing as much time. I'm transferring.
Yep.
We've already got, and this all started with COVID.
Mm-hmm.
The transfer portal that opened up, and these extra years that kids have gotten, the extra years they've gotten because of losing time, because that was all fine and understood. But now with this portal, you've already got guys that have transferred 2, 3, and 4 times.
Oh yeah,
since 2020.
Oh yeah, Jalen Hurts.
So
he
transferred once.
He transferred once, but still, it's transferring once wasn't even something when we were younger that happened a lot.
But you've literally got guys that are already on their 3rd and 4th team since this opened up, and it's just because you've now given them an out, and nobody has to stick around and earn it now. Like, oh, if they're not starting, it's everybody else's fault. It's the coaching staff's fault, and I'm going to go somewhere else where they promise me that I'm going to start.
And the flip side is, I went to someplace and the coaching staff changed, and that's another thing. And I don't know. I just,
and that was the one thing that I could always understand about not losing a year of eligibility, because, that is true. It wasn't necessarily fair. I can see that perspective of it not being fair, that I go here because I like the coach, and, not that he made me promises, but I like that coach and I could see my future there, and I'm there 1 year and then he leaves.
Yeah.
But that shows you the importance of not picking your school based on the coach, because there's no guarantee that they're going to be around.
So do you think maybe some of this NIL money will cut down on these big name transfers? Do you think that's a possibility?
So now what's stopping the big collective at Texas A&M, and I'm just throwing names out there because
whatever,
we heard that early.
Texas A&M, big schools that are involved,
contacting the kid at Alabama.
A contract.
Who said anything about contracts though?
There's no way. And this, I don't know.
I haven't heard anything about contracts.
There's no way that there's not going to be a contract involved with some of the money.
There's no way these kids are signing 3 years contracts at a college.
Yeah, but they need agents.
There's going to be, and I don't know how this is going to work because I haven't heard anyone talk about contracts.
I know.
So you can, the contract's not necessarily to be there.
It's
I don't know. If that's the case, then that's going to add another thing. That's going to be a thing because kids aren't going to sign that. Some won't. If I'm one of the number 1 kids in the nation at whatever my position is, I'm not getting locked down on that, because what if another school comes along and is like, hey, we have more than that? That it just adds too many. And I don't know. Maybe it doesn't sound like the NCAA has rules to really rein all this in.
Can't do anything about it.
It's like the Wild West. And I feel like that's what the NCAA is worried about, because they know they don't have a handle on it, and they're worried about all these consequences that are going to come from it.
Yeah, they're worried that they can't protect the athletes, and
they can't protect the athletes. They can't protect them school. They can't protect the NCAA.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a lot, man. And you can really talk about this forever. And I, love to hear other people's perspective on it. And maybe there's people out there listening that have way more knowledge on this whole NIL thing. Maybe you're a college coach or a college something, or I don't know. There's probably people listening that, have way more knowledge on this than we do. Definitely not coming off as experts on this because we're certainly not. This is very confusing and there's so many questions that we don't have answers for.
I don't think anybody's an expert on this. I don't even think these
people involved would be no more than us.
The proposed, experts are experts on this. One thing, it's funny, I do have and the minute we started talking about money in these big collectives is, there is an Ivy League, Dartmouth has football, Princeton has football, Harvard has football, Yale has football. All right.
Right.
So there is an Ivy League, and the average, Ivy League graduate salary is more than twice that of,
right,
of the average SEC college graduate. Not that, opportunity is opportunity after college. Don't get me wrong. What is to stop someplace like Princeton putting together 3 or 4 times the collective that any SEC school is capable of putting together? Is that a possibility?
I think the thing on that is the next level.
Oh yeah.
Because what you're going to make in the NFL is if you're a real player, is going to blow anything away from collect or NIL money.
It's going to dwarf that.
And it would take a long time before, kids go to Alabama because they know it's a gateway to the NFL.
Yes.
Because of the success.
If they have the talent,
so
if they play, it's definitely.
Am I going to go to Princeton and play against that level? Because the level of competition that you play against is a big factor in getting to the next level.
Oh, it is.
So is a kid, is a top tier recruiting class kid gonna go to Princeton because they're offering a lot of money, but it hurts their future money?
Over time, does money elevate the talent at these schools?
But it would take time. That would take a lot of time.
You know what I'm saying? You're talking about change, and you're talking about
the other issue there is the school and the academic portion of it and getting into the school. So is Princeton, Harvard, Yale lowering their academic standards to bring these kids in?
Yeah.
That many?
Listen.
There wouldn't be an Ivy League anymore, though. It would diminish that
money's involved now, though.
Yeah, but money's involved in the Ivy League, not based on athletics in general.
I don't know. I just see.
I don't think the old heads of running these Ivy League schools are going to say, let's bring in these kids with a 2.2 GPA in high school, because
I don't know.
I don't see their devotion to athletics over riding their academic standing.
Riding academic. I see this as a big change. It's a generational change to the NCAA. It is very possibly the biggest change the NCAA has ever seen in its existence, right? And I think with change comes opportunity. And maybe it's not the Ivy League. Maybe it's some of these D3 schools. Maybe it's some of these D2 schools who, even though they've always offered gateways for their athletes to go to school, they haven't been able to offer athletic scholarships for kids to go to school. So how does this change the game, for some of those schools? And will it make, schools, that maybe aren't as competitive, more competitive?
Well, it definitely could. I could see it happening. Yeah. It's whether or not, like we said before, with these it all depends on these collectives and how much money they're throwing in. But that's what I said. Like, what stops some of these Division III schools that don't offer scholarships, from having alumni and boosters, creating a nice collective and swaying some marginal Division I talent, down there for money, because maybe you find those kids that have talent, but don't necessarily think they have next level talent. Well, let me go down to Division III school and make a few $100,000 in my career there, and before I'm out into the real world, because I'm probably not making it to the NFL anyway. Like, it would sway me.
There are plenty of kids who go to Division I schools who don't start.
Oh my gosh.
And who don't go to the next level.
Listen, if you think about the number of kids on any given Division I, roster in a year, like, it's a very small percentage that go to the next level.
Yes.
So, there's plenty of them, while super talented, they're not next level talented. So do I go and sit for 2 or 3 years, maybe get 1 year of starting at a bigger, football school? Or do I go down to, Division III Rowan and start for 4 years and make a couple $100,000 while I'm there because the collective wants to pay me? 50, 60 grand a year.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We're not talking same level money that maybe Alabama's, got to give to kids, but 50 grand for a kid that's in school.
Mm-hmm. And maybe you wouldn't have got that NIL money in Alabama.
Yeah. You would have been so down on the depth chart that wouldn't even have been offered to you.
Because, I mean, let's be honest, and you've said this before, as many kids that are on the team on any given weekend, on any given Saturday in college football, there's only going to be 22 of them on the field.
Right. Yeah. And a couple sprinkled in.
And a couple sprinkled in.
And you talk about, college rosters, they got a lot more guys on the team than you have, in a 53-man NFL roster. You know? So, yeah, you got a lot of kids that go that, they're good enough to go there and be a backup. And maybe by the time you get to your senior year, play a little, but that elite level that moves on and gets drafted, like that's tiny percentage.
It is.
So, I mean, you could definitely be swayed. I mean, and most of the kids know, like, if you're have a shot, I mean, all athletes have confidence, but when you're dealing with, you go to Alabama and you're riding pine and never playing, you're there and you love it, but you're not moving on to the next level.
You're not, you mean if you play like, 8 quarters of football season, you're not getting invited to the combine?
No, probably not. So that's when money could really have a factor. And I haven't heard anything about it. I don't know anything about, those lower levels doing it, but it's open to them.
These are all possibilities now.
It's open because it's for all levels. It's not just Division I. This NIL is open to all NCAA levels.
And does that thin out the herd? Does that thin out the depth of some of these big NFL programs? Where maybe some of these kids that were adding good solid depth, that second or third defensive tackle that was there to rotate
teams?
Yeah, in college teams. That's what I meant.
Yeah.
Maybe, some of those rotational players that added that depth, which, so often you see, these big schools come out against these little schools and you're watching the first quarter and it's kind of close. You watch the second quarter and it's like, it looks like the smaller team's not going to win. And then at the end of the game, the score is like 60-20 because in the third and fourth quarters, the depth of these bigger teams just crushes these small programs that don't have the depth.
Yep.
So that depth, I mean, as good as talent, I mean, as much as talent means, as much as starters mean, as much as all of that means, that depth is a big part of these big programs. Yeah. And does the NIL maybe over time kind of thin that herd out?
Yeah. So many things. I think if we sat here and talked about this for another couple hours, we could think of other things that are going to be affected and the ways it's going to change the game and possibilities and all this and things that need to be regulated. It's a big can of worms.
Thing. And listen, speaking of money, there's a link down below. You can support the channel for as little as $3 a month. And we can get the big guy some new headphones.
Shit, all these things. I like white sunglasses, but I don't know about headphones.
And listen, make sure you're following us, like we said, on these podcast platforms, whether it's Apple, whether it's Spotify, whether it's, wherever you're following us. And check us out on the YouTube if you have never seen us and want to see what we look like sitting here behind my desk.
Yeah, definitely go there. And, even if you don't really watch your podcasts, or if you don't really watch your podcast, you listen to them on Spotify, Apple, whatever, just run over to YouTube, give us that sub for support. And then you can keep watching over on, or keep saying watching, keep listening. I'm used to the YouTube world. Keep listening on the actual Spotify or whatever.
So this has been a good one. And, we said we were going to come here and talk about all kinds of different things. And obviously, this American ride, there's nothing more American to us really, than football. We love football. We both watch football. And kind of the end of a 2-part series here where we talked about the NFL a little bit. And this is college. And
it's football season, man.
It's time to go.
It is. So
this weekend, man, it's go time.
And we'll have to revisit some of this maybe towards the end of the season or something and kind of come back and circle back and see what some of the stuff we talked about, how it actually played out. But I mean, there's we said in the beginning, there's so many things to talk about. Football is one of those things that we enjoy. But again, if you guys, I tell you this every week, if you have something, a topic you think would be a cool discussion, This American Ride 1776 at Gmail. Shoot us an email. Let us know what you think. Let us know, whatever you want to let us know. But if you have a topic, definitely shoot that out there because, we're down to talk about just about anything.
And let us know how you feel about the NIL, if you were even aware that any of this was going on. Or
I have a feeling a lot of people don't even know about this.
Yeah, I think so too.
it's going to be interesting. So yeah, let us know what you think, and thanks for listening.
All right, man. We'll catch you in the next one.
Later.
Bye.